and they were called paper entrepreneurialism. They require businesses themselves the components or Uncle Herbie found out in Halliburton has something to do with Enron as well, which is energy development. Lolo Santoro was headed national executive vice president for Standard Oil, and he was in the oil business, but he would also read the death squads for the Indonesian army. Well, I had a brother who was into that in the petroleum production, which is part of it. Anyway, you get Lolo Santoro, one of the death squads for the Indonesian government. So amid that you have money, Indonesia had access to the world's largest oil reserve as they received at the time. So Standard Oil used its muscle and its position to take over the oil industry in Indonesia, which they couldn't do under American law. So George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush, Uncle Herbie, George Herbert Walker, sets up the supply of oil. They have a family holding company. It's an offshore, which is chartered in Kuwait, by the way. Keep that in mind. Which wound up happening is that George Herbert Walker, dealt with Lolo Santoro quite frequently on oil deals. And remember, George Herbert Walker became chief of the CIA under the Ford administration. And he deals with their number one contract of guy over Indonesia, which is now what's going on. Lolo ran intelligence for the CIA in a contract in China, North Korea, North Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Indonesia. So Barack's grandmother hustles her daughter, who was 17 at the time. They were boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with Barack Obama Sr., who was being recruited by Kenya to offset Joe Kenyatta in the Malab. That was the CIA project. Grandmommy, vice president of Hawaiian Bank, and she screwed the funds for the CIA in the South and Northwest Pacific at the time. So she puts him together with her daughter, who was 17 years old, who was born, and then they quickly go their separate ways, and then grandmommy gets daughter and hooks her up with Lola Santoro. And remember, grandmommy is married to President Bush's first cousin. That's where you get this. He's Bush's first cousin. And they're all nephews to Uncle Herbie, who found Halliburton in 1966 in Oklahoma. The Halliburton. That's why you got Tyrese Halliburton. So he can be Papa. Tyrese Halliburton. Man, he was the most passionate. Ah, this the bitches and hoes. The bitches and hoes. Oh, this free love feminist movement that we got going in the late 60s, early 70s, which start off through now. Your in-laws are. That was Singapore, that was Nigeria, that was Kenya, South Africa, that was Pakistan, that was India, Jamaica, man, Bahamas, that was Barbados, that was Zealand. Yeah, man. This is like, yeah, man. This, this, it's like, yeah, man. Friend, it's that little baby girl. And for the Jamaica, or so her parents, but she English aristocrat. I won't even mention the name. They were related to the English royals. She's blonde hair, blue eyes. She was born in Jamaica because aristocratic parents just happened to. English nobility parents were born in the place. So it's an interesting thing when you see that in the St. Elizabeth patties with all the black and white Jamaicans are, and it's an interesting look-ups. We said an international thing, but a family situation that gets in here. And Kamala's folk was trying to get in on and through the mother because they were Hindu. Now the dad said this background is Irish and also from India. The Hindu thing, and he became a Marxist because that was going on back when he was coming of age in the early 1960s. When you get this skin in place, you run into the fact that their family situated. Now, I was in Hollywood. I made a whole lot of money. It was all over the country, and I had two places in Aspen, Colorado. So my ex was a social climber, and she was a skiing instructor up in Aspen. So everybody wanted to go to skiing with Mrs. Brown in the backcountry. So we wound up meeting billionaires and really multi-millionaires. It's interesting because there's these family connections that are not obvious except when you walk around in Aspen. It's awful. Everybody starts at 6 feet one for the females. And there's some of these guys that all look like Adonis that are these great athletes. Like, damn, man, like they're smart, good looking and athletic. And they all have these interesting and they don't make it public. At 6 feet one for the females, and get to these guys that all look like Adonis that are these great athletes, damn. They breed, smart, good looking and athletic. And they all have these interesting relationships with each other that are obvious and they don't make public. You had started the Adams family. You had President Adams and his son, President Adams, the Roosevelts, starting with the Adams family. You had President John Adams and his son, President John Quincy Adams. And you have the Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Franklin, Delano Roosevelt. You had the Kennedys, and then you had the muscle. Joe Kennedy. Joe Kennedy was a gangster. He was a bootlegger. He was a bootlegger, and yeah, I'll tell you some stuff off the record about that. So it's like when you get this whole thing, and then you get the Bushes in here, and then you have the Clintons who were newbies in this whole thing, and now you have some other stuff that's going on. These peripheral. It's a selection. It's not all. No, it's not an election. It's a selection. It's a selection. Who they select? Who they selected to be? And then you find some. Look at Barack Obama. What kind of connection does Barack Obama or Barry Soetoro have with the United States? He got a long history for his mother's side of the family, and they were slave owners. And two of his ancestors were Confederate officers during the Civil War. One even rode for Contrell the guerrilla up in Kansas and Missouri. He got a connection, but even when you get away from whether Kamala is black, what connection does she has with the United States? Probably the least out of any candidate for president in this country's history. So you have a situation where her parents have academic visas. They're transfers. They have no. So you have. So you have her parents have academic visas. They're transitory. They have no intention of being permanent or presidential or citizens. Just passing through. And she lies a lot about it. She lies a lot about when she got to Canada, how old she was, and that's her background. I went to high school, wealthy, connect, wealth. I mean, she graduated from high school, wealthy, and joined HBCU, which is the greatest HBCU ever, which is Howard. I don't know about Hampton. Wealthy Canadian, Cana- Canadian, and she don't have that American back. And you realize it's Canadian. Her parents had academic visas. They transferred. They had no intention of being permanent residents or citizens since it's passing through. And she lies a lot about it. And you seen that, when she got to Canada, how old she was, and that's your background. That's who wealthy Canadian, the whole 9 yards, and she doesn't have that American vibe, from elementary school that talk about what this country's supposed to be about. You have this thing where it's part of the Commonwealth, so it's subjects. So you probably talk to your husband about that, and your father-in-law that, and they view this whole thing about being subjects in a different way that we here in the States view about being citizens. Very different, but that's the background with Kamala, the way she was brought up. And you get the feeling that somebody is trying to become part of something, but they don't want anybody to do any real connection. The more isolated they are, the more convenient control. The day is tomorrow, which is why yesterday is tomorrow too, which is why we all, word salad nonsense, which you got a silly somebody that's lazy, that's not the brightest bulb on the shelf, and easily to be manipulated because somebody done in Hollywood, they call it the casting couch routine to get to where they are. But at some point, if you get to the top of the casting couch, because the problem is there's nobody to sleep with. at a certain point, you have to have the raw talent. If you don't have the talent, then you're not going to able to do anything much, and that's where the problem is. Is who is behind her?